5 people on a crew instead of the 4-man crew because we don't have the equipment. Is that correct?
Kenny Hall, Deputy Director. When this equipment comes to us, if we purchase it, it will be on the road the next day, being utilized immediately.
Okay. I'll let you get back. I'll let you get back to protocol, and we'll come back. We'll come back to you guys. Stay close, Kenny. Stay close.
Stay close. Stay close. At this time, we're going to ask for any citizens' comments, Madam Clerk.
None indicating.
Okay. At this time, we'll entertain a motion to adopt the ordinance.
So moved.
Second. Thank you. Now we'll go to Director Neil Martin.
So, sorry, that was a procedural thing we had to take care of. So, will this mean that we'll have 8 additional people on a crew? I think what I was hearing was no. And let me back up. When I mentioned 8 people, this equipment would be for 2 crews.
Yes.
Of 8 people associated with that.
Yes.
But in my brain, and just kind of thinking through our conversation last week, or when I left the conversation last week, I just wanted to make sure that if we purchase this, that we would have 2 additional crews come out. But I don't think that's okay. That's not. This is just going to backfill equipment that's keeping 3 crews, 2 crews working.
Yes. And what it'll also give us, it will allow us some redundancy. So the existing equipment that the crew 3 and 4, which is where this new equipment would go, would be pulled out of service, rehabbed, and then be available for anybody in the fleet.
So how many leaks is this going to allow us to be able to take care of? What would be the increase in production that we're going to see based off of
There's so many variables in that. What it'll allow us to do is that currently, right now, crew 3 and 4 are down. Their dump trucks are out of service. And
we have 3 crews.
3 crews going right now.
And this would be for the 3 crews that do normal leaks, right?
The 5 crews that normally do
5 crews.
5s.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And 2 of those crews are down right now.
Yes.
So if we had this equipment, they wouldn't be down. We'd have 5.
Right. And then on top of that, if the other crew's equipment go down, the equipment that's being replaced would be available to them to jump right into. So if it would exponentially increase leak repairs, it would not be for down equipment.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same page as to what this is going to do. It's not going to add staff.
No.
It's going to replace equipment that's there. Okay. Thank you.
No.
Director Kemp.
Most of my questions were answered by Kenny there, so just one question for Lance. Lance, these cuts that you're proposing, just want to clarify, don't touch personnel, correct?
This 1.17 does not touch personnel. This is out of the actual operating, and it also does not account for any personnel accrual time. So if we've had an empty position for 4 months, you accrue the cost of the salaries. That is not included in that. This is strictly operating expenses, which include things like materials, training, those types of things.
Other one question is just trying to, I think that this would help the case either way, I would think, but just want to go ahead and ask, how will these cuts impact any sort of debt ratio? Did we make sure and confirm? I know even LaVon Morton was here last meeting and assured us that purchasing equipment, but with these cuts that are coming, I mean, is there any impact within these cuts to the debt service ratio?
And I would defer to Andy, but I would say that because this is a one-time purchase as opposed to year-over-year operating expense, I think, well, the cuts in and of themselves reduce the operating expense, but the purchase itself, I believe, because it's a one-time, does not have an impact on the debt service ratio, but I would have to defer to our CFO.
Okay, thank you.
Director George Cassavas.
Lance, what happens to the old equipment?
We will be rehabbing it and having it there so that if something else breaks down, a crew can use.
It'll still be.
It will still be but we'll have time. Some of these vehicles, when they break down, they're down for 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. So when we get it back, it will be stationed. So if another one breaks down, while that one's off being repaired.
So we'll have a backup in other words.
Yes, that's exactly correct.
And that'll save a lot of
of downtime, and that will allow us to fix more leaks.
Okay, thank you.
Director Kevin Settle.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Lance, last week for the presentation and discussion. You know, as I talked about last week, the fixing leaks is more of a reactive approach. We get a leak, we're fixing it. And I'd like to have, I'm okay with buying this, but between now and the next 3 months, I'd like to have a discussion about converting one of these to a water line replacement crew, where we go into those hot spots where we get a bunch of leaks. Instead of fixing a leak, we go in there and replace all the pipe and do it all at one time. And that way, we're not constantly fixing, we're replacing. So, you know, do some legwork. What would the crew look like? You know, it's like the sidewalk program we started years ago. First couple of years is only a couple miles, but now they're knocking it out. They got the routine, they got the equipment. Kind of the same principle. Residential areas, not transmission lines, not big areas, but residential area, 2-inch line, 4-inch line. What would it take to go in the neighborhoods that have that old pipe? We don't want to talk about what it is, the old pipe, and go knock out and fix those pipes. And so we're not fixing leaks, we're replacing the problem. Also look at what it would take to go to the supplier, not the maker of the PVC pipe. Right. If they don't want to sell to us, find one that does. If they want to sell to a company, maybe we start up the City of Portsmouth Pipe Company as a part of the city, and we buy pipe that way. I think there's ways around this that we can solve, we can get the leaks fixed, but we're doing it by replacing the water lines. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Director Neil Martin.
One thing I would add, and it kind of goes off to what Director Kemp was saying, in the future, when we come to us, whether it be cutting something or buying something that's not budgeted, things like that, if you could do the legwork to get the impact to the debt service coverage ratio,
yes,
I think that would be helpful, because I'm going to ask it every time. I know a number of us are going to ask it. I think that would be helpful for us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Director Good.
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't plan on asking this, but since Director Settle asked this question about, you know, seeing how much it's going to cost, you know, to replace water lines while we're in the area, my question is to you, Lance, is although I think that's a great idea, would that money that we're speaking about spending for these water lines, being proactive, replacing water lines, would that money come from the same pot of money that we need to replace a lot of the equipment there at the Mazard treatment plant?
No, well, we'd be looking at water, and that's wastewater. So Mazard's wastewater, and we try to kind of keep that separated. The one thing that we would have to look at is if we would do that as a project, so it would come out of the CIP, or would that continue to come out of operating? And that would have, if it comes out of the operating, because you have the additional materials for removing the lines and doing all of that, that would have a potential impact on the debt service coverage. But that's something that I think, to Director Settle's point, we need to investigate what's the best way to handle that. But that really would not, that comes out of the kind of the water side, and we try to keep that as separated as possible.
Okay, thank you, Lance. Very good suggestion, Director Settle.
Thank you. Director Kevin Settle.
Andre, so for clarification, I was just trying to talk about taking one of the 5 crews, convert it to a line replacement crew, go to the wholesale market, not wholesale market, you know, go to the supplier, buy it for what this wholesalers are buying it for. You know, if you can get 4, 5, 6 miles of 2-inch pipe at $1 or $2, you know, it's gonna cost you $20,000, $40,000, $50,000, but then you got your whole year covered. And then all you got to do is buy the T's in the 90s. And that's all I was trying to do, because if the equipment's there and the people are there, all you're really out is, besides those, which is a cost to the city, but all you're really out is the piping. And so how do you get that at a good discount when you buy, as Director Savis and I are talking about, you go buy in the market, you buy 5, 6, 8 miles of 2-inch pipe, you're buying what a lot of people are buying for the whole year. We can buy that, and probably, I'm hoping we get 4, 5 miles a year replaced. It's like anything else. The first year will be probably slow, but as you get, you get in the same neighborhoods that are same patterns, you know where they're at. The problem's going to be is going across underneath the street versus if it's in the yard. So those are things that Lance's team good. But if you go into a spot and say, hey, we've replaced 500 leaks in this area, and it's so many miles, I'm using that, or 50, whatever it is, then go in the hot spot and start replacing lines. then and you shouldn't have a water leak for the next X amount of years. And then you go to the next neighborhood and kind of just not go random. You kind of just spot where the problems are and start working yourselves around from the hot spots and the lines that really need to be placed because of the age. You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Yes, go ahead, Director.
Just one more in the spirit of this conversation, because I'm excited about this progress. I know for the first time, the pressure reduction I heard was, Director Martin and I were talking, I was just like, man, that's the first time I've heard this. I want to make sure that we don't lose that input and put that, is that in our CIP?
Yes, that was actually in the, when we had a 10-year water CIP, that has been in that
Okay.
For some time. And
Perfect.
I can actually, if I may, with just a few minutes, if those of you that remember where the old Odom's property was over on 6th and Division, that's exactly where that goes. That's why nothing can be built there is number one, we have a large wastewater interceptor that goes underneath it, but number two, that was the prime location for that pressure reducing station.
Director Settle.
One last thing, Lance, when you do your analysis, I'd like you to also work with the street and engineering department and see how we can tie when we do overlays and street reconstruction in the neighborhoods, how we can redo the water line replacement at the same time. That would save us in digging and extra construction. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other comments from the board? If not, please call the roll.
Directors Rego?
Yes.
Good?
Yes.
Kemp?
Yes.
George Katsavas? Christina Katsavas?
Yes.
Settle?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
It's approved, 7 in favor and 0 opposed.
We're going to go to item 2, which is our consent agenda. Mr. Dingman, you recognize.
Thank you, Mayor. There are 4 items listed on this evening's consent agenda. There's a resolution authorizing partial payment to Forsgren on the street overlay project, a resolution approving change order number 2 to the contract with Dale Crampton Company, a resolution authorizing engineering construction observation services with Burns & McDonnell on transmission line casing project, and a resolution authorizing the purchase of vehicles for the police department.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any items on the agenda that you'd like to have pulled for a separate discussion? Director Neil Martin.
Yeah, just a discussion or a question on A and C.
Okay, any others?
D, Mayor.
D, okay. Let's start with A. You recognized.
On A, Stan, what's the timeline on completing Phoenix?
Contract completion is the 15th of May. We're actually going to be pretty close to that, I believe.
So right now, I know you've got part of it done. So the 15th of May would be the rest all the way down to Towson?
Yes, they, I don't know if you saw this morning, they've started between 31st and 24th
Okay.
Street. They've milled the outside, should hopefully get that paved tomorrow.
Oh, very good.
And then the anticipation is to, progress on further to the west, weather permitting. Basically, what's left is primarily asphalt. We've got some utility work that needs to be done, but it's outside of the limits of where the asphalt is. But I'm hopeful that we can have this thing paved before school lets up.
Okay, very good. Awesome. Thank you.
Next item. Item C.
Yeah, on item C, Jeff, I think you communicated with us about this transmission line as it comes down, and part of it being unfunded. At what point is funded on this project? I know this one, you're asking for funding for this, but in an email you sent us, there was an unfunded portion of the transmission line, and I want to make sure that I know what the scope that is unfunded. Does that make, am I?
No, I'm not following that
Okay.
at all. Well, this is a casing installation project that goes in the area where the transmission line will go.
Okay.
And so this is getting ahead of the highway project, I
Okay.
believe. And so this isn't something that is RDOT is 100% reimbursing us for this
Part?
particular.
Okay.
Yeah.
But is any portion of the water transmission line unfunded at this point?
Well, a large part of it is. Most of it is unfunded because we haven't identified that funding yet. But that doesn't mean we're stopping on the design and the planning
Okay.
for it. But when it comes to time for actual construction, yes, there's a lot of it that's not funded yet.
That's what I wanted
Director
to
Martin,
know.
are you referring to the bridge?
Well, no, I mean, I think it's just in general, that transmission line project in and of itself being unfunded by us.
That's correct.
So, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
But we are still working towards, like I said, towards the design and making sure all of it is ready to go when we can identify funding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Did we have one other item? Item D?
Director Casavis.
Danny? Yes, sir. Just a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
So 8 primary vehicles, patrol vehicles,
Correct.
2 more motorcycle units, officers,
Replacing.
replace.
Yes.
This is a replace or an additional?
Replacement.
That'll still give us 4? Or do we have 4 or 5? I can't remember.
5, I believe.
5. Okay. Now, in the past, we used to use vehicles from asset forfeiture. Do we not do that anymore for police work?
Some of the unmarks are asset forfeiture, yes. Primarily used by detectives.
Well, you got unmarked police vehicle and upfitting. There's no way to use an asset forfeiture vehicle for that.
Well, we
Or-
could, but
I'm sorry?
I said we could, but I can't. I mean, I can't supplant the budget with that.
Yeah.
This isn't it's unmarked. It's for one of the captains.
Okay. So, let me understand. So the asset forfeiture vehicles are used for some instances?
The ones we have are in use, the ones that are serviceable, and those belong to the 12th Judicial District Task Force. I mean, we're allowed to use them.
Okay. Okay. That's it, Dan. Thank you.
Director Settle?
Chief Baker, when you get the 2 new motorcycles, I'd like to maybe have a show and tell here at the board meeting one time. Harleys are good motorcycles, and I'm eager to see the new cycles, so thank you.
I couldn't understand the first part of what
I said I'd like to see the new, hopefully you can bring the new cycles to the board meeting
Oh,
to show us
sure.
when I get them. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Let you ride it if you want to.
We can get George Casavis to ride them.
Mr. Dingman, you recognize? You're good. Okay. At this time, Madam Clerk, are there any citizens' comments?
There was only been marks on item 2C to answer questions.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, we entertain a motion to adopt all consent agenda items.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, please call the roll.
Directors Good,
Yes.
Kemp,
Yes.
George Katsavas.
Yes.
Christina Katsavas. Yes. Settle,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Rigo.
Yes.
It's approved, 7 in favor and 0 opposed.
Thank you very much. This time we'll go to the officials forum. I don't have anything. Director Rigo? Director Good, you recognize?
Nothing.
Okay, Director Kemp?
Just one thing for administration to check on. I sat through a Beautify Fort Smith meeting and known that we took over the mowing of several of the off-ramps and on-ramps of the interstate because there was some savings that we could use as dollars, which I'm totally for. But it did look like they may be trying to mow several at one time before rain comes. But whatever they've mowed at Jenny Lind, it's still pretty rough. I'm hoping they're going to come back with a finishing mower. And I just think as our city continues to grow, I'd love to see the interstate, off-ramp, on-ramps, if we are the ones doing that, maybe just address that. And they may already be addressing it. It just, what it looked like, it still kind of looked pretty rough around the edges. Thank you.
Director George Katsavas?
Yeah, Mayor, I just have a question for Jeff. Jeff, have you or anybody in administration been contacted or contacted the state or the governor's office about relocating the prison at Chaffee, Fort Chaffee?
Not specifically. I did send the board an email a week or so ago that discussed a meeting that we had with a representative of the governor's staff,
Yeah.
and they brought along their consultant. We had a discussion on availability of water and where water is, and we talked a little bit about our water transmission line project and the fact that we are building or anticipating that we will eventually build a water line that goes down in the vicinity of where I-49 will go. We had a discussion about that. We had about a month or so ago, Director Kemp and Chris Hoover and I went to Little Rock, and we spoke with the governor's staff, and we asked, with this anticipated prison facility, what's been the prospect for water supply? And they said, well, we'll follow up with you on that. I don't know what discussions had been at that point, but that's what generated this meeting that we had. And there was no official exchange of information. There's not been any studies done. During that meeting, we recognized that we did not include a pretty important partner, the water district that serves east of town. They would be an important part of any discussion that goes forward. But at this point, it was just a discussion. And we do have availability of water in Lake Fort Smith. We do have a treatment plant that needs to be updated or upgraded to produce larger quantities. We have a transmission line that needs to be replaced and then added to the east side of town. We have all of those things that we have identified. And if all of those things are built like we anticipate they will be, then we will have water supply that would be sufficient to provide all kinds of water to the east part of Fort Smith and points east. That's as far as that discussion went.
Was there any discussion about the state paying for any of the infrastructure, if that were to happen?
Not officially, no. I mean, we frankly made an ask, so we'd appreciate a little help on this if that's what comes to pass. But no, there's not been any official discussion on any of that.
Any of that. So where was this left at?
I think it was left that our utility staff would want to have a conversation with the water district to see what their feasibility might even be. And
Now, where was this left at with the state as far as a possible decision?
there's not really any.
Nothing.
There was no timeline left left to it. There was no agreement to meet again. Although I think that we would anticipate that we would once we get some feedback from the water district and include them. They need to be at the table because there's going to be if it comes to pass, there'll be a need to get water from Fort Smith out there. And we don't have water lines out there, and we don't anticipate building any. And so there's a water infrastructure already built that the water district owns, and they may have capital needs that could use some assistance as well.
What did they tell you the average inmate uses in water per day? Was it 125 gallons?
That's about what I think we're using 120 gallons, but I think that's right.
So one inmate uses 120 gallons per day. Lance, is that correct or close? So you don't have to go. So if you had 3,000 inmates at 100, how much water would that be per day?
360,000 gallons.
360,000 gallons per day.
But you also have to take into account the staff.
Yeah.
So I think we were looking at anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million gallons.
So could we supply that?
Right now?
No.
No.
Even if they did build out at Chaffee, we still can't supply that kind of water, can we?
It would be, we'd have to look at the hydraulic model, but I'd say it would be difficult because we have, if it's built on Fort Chaffee property, that would, I really don't know because our hydraulic model, we're concentrating on supplying our customers in Fort Smith, first and foremost.
Well, yeah, that's what it should be first. Okay, thank you, Lance.
Director Christina Casavas.
I just have a quick question for Andy about when we can expect the first quarter financials. I know you said maybe mid to late April.
I'll get them out next week, I think.
Okay.
We are pulling them. We're reviewing them as we go, but we want to make sure they're accurate, but do want to get them to you as soon as possible. So I think next week is a good time frame.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just want to kind of see how we're doing with Q1 versus what we budgeted for and see where we're at. Thank you.
Yep.
Director Settle.
Mayor, if you don't mind, I'll let Mr. Director Martin speak because he's chomping at the bit to speak. So after that, I'll go after him.
So I just want to clarify. There have been zero discussions between the state of Arkansas, legislators, and the city of Fort Smith about building a prison in Fort Smith or Chaffee Crossing.
Zero.
Zero.
Zero discussion.
None whatsoever.
Correct.
Okay. I want to make sure everybody hears that. Zero discussion. That was thrown about by a senator, I believe.
It's not included me, I'll tell you that.
Okay.
And I don't believe it's included our water department.
No, I see heads shaking. I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on that. I'm not for a prison in Fort Smith.
Was it a local senator?
Senator Stubblefield.
Okay.
So, media, those watching online, make sure that we
Right.
print that. That's all I got right now.
Director Settle?
I will, thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much. That's all.
Okay, thank you. This time we'll go to the administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to mention that the city offices will be closed on Friday in observance of Good Friday. There have been 3 forums scheduled, public forums regarding the sales and use tax special election. If you want to make note of these, April the 17th on Thursday, 2 days from now, at 6 p.m. at the main public library. On Monday, April the 28th, at 6 p.m. at the Arkansas Colleges of Health Education. And then on Monday, May the 5th, at 6 p.m. at the Fort Smith Senior Center on Kavanaugh Road.
And I just want to clarify, because the Arkansas Colleges of Health Education has a couple different facilities. Bless you. That meeting's going to be taking place at the event space at the Research Institute Health and Wellness Center over the old Golden Living Building.
Fair point. I would have missed that. Thank you.
Is that not right, Josh?
Oh,
Lecture hall at the Chad Colley location. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
6 p.m. They're all 3 at 6 p.m.
Anything else?
No, that's all.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. This time we're going to go into executive session and make appointments to future Fort Smith Committee, Housing Assistance Board, Planning Commission, Sebastian County Regional Solid Waste Management Board, Transit Advisory Commission, Director of Audit, City Administrator, and City Administrator.
Andre, our day has come. It is you and me.
We need to get a quorum. We have a quorum. This time we're going to reconvene. And the following appointments have been made. Future Fort Smith Committee, Ms. Brianka Hollins. The Housing Assistance Board, Mike Jackamore, James Rose, Richard Shaw, and Barbara Turner. Planning Commission, Zach Ledford, Jackson Mendenhall, Vicki Newton, and David Tyler. Sebastian County Regional.
No, Zach led, there's only three, Zach, Vicki.
Okay, I'm sorry. Correction, on the Planning Commission, Zach Ledford, Vicki Newton, and David Tyler. Okay, on the Sebastian County Regional Solid Waste Management Board, David Chanel and Cassie Wilson. And then the Transit Advisory Commission, Marion Azab. Okay.
Motion approved, said appointments.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. There was no action taken on the internal auditor or the administrator. This time we entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. This time we will convene a called special study session. And we will go to item 1 on that agenda.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a couple
Yes,
remarks?
Director Rigo, you're recognized.
I just want to say to my colleagues and administration and utilities folks, the folks watching before you all dive in, I'm going to be leaving. I've got a migraine that's really bad. But I just wanted to I wanted the record to reflect that I commend the work that you put in. You know, I read the materials, thought it was very thoughtful, very helpful. You took a directive seriously and put serious things in front of us for consideration. I think it's probably, to my eyes, a model for other departments to consider as we work through this process. And, you know, for the record, I would be, based on the materials that we read, I would be in favor of the option that removes the vacant positions and takes out over $960,000 for savings. So thank you all for the work and the short order in which you presented it, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Rigo, and get well.
Like having maybe a preemptive plan.
Okay, we'll go to item 1.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 1 is read the 2025 departmental operating budget for the Water Utilities Department. And outside of any questions from board members, I'll can defer to Lance McAvoy, and he's got his deputies that he will introduce with him this evening.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Dingman. With me tonight, you have already met Kenny Hall, Deputy Director of Water and Sewer Line Maintenance. This is Raul Tacrol, and I probably butchered his last name again, and I apologize. He is the Deputy Director over operations, which includes water and wastewater treatment, our environmental quality group, as well as our what we call vertical maintenance. That would be our plants and pump stations. Jimmy Johnson would have been here. However, this is the 1 week of the year that he takes off to celebrate Passover with his family, and I did not want to interrupt that. So he has briefed me last week on what needs to be discussed in engineering. And to start off with, last year, at the end of the year, the department, when we budget, we try not to use all of our budget. We gave back about $5 million last year out of the budget. So we are very cognizant of our spending throughout the year. When you deal with water and wastewater, you have to kind of walk a fine line, especially when it comes to energy and chemicals. Because if we have a really wet year, we use a lot more wastewater chemicals. If we have a real dry year, we use a lot of drinking water chemicals. And if you have a wet winter and a dry summer, you end up using a lot of both. And with those chemicals, whenever you're adding more chemicals, you're using more electricity because you're running pumps, aeration systems, things of that nature. So we don't go worst case scenario, but we try to look at historical trends. We look at what is being predicted for future weather and base our usage and budgeting on that. I do not know how the board wants to go through this. I will tell you that we did go through each line item internally. This was not done just by me. This was done as a group with the deputies involved as well as program managers for some of the programs. We did find cost savings. One of the things that Mr. Dingman did ask is to look at reduction of FTEs, and you'll see that in your memo that we included and some options to go with that. The only other thing I will say is in that memo, there was an error. And in, I believe it is program 5522, there was $160,000 savings around that. Their entire operating budget is $190, and I made an error by putting in the 100. However, tonight, when I presented what the savings that we had found of 1.17, that was actually $50,000 more than what was in the budget, because after last week when we put this together, we've been working on this, I asked staff on Thursday and Friday and yesterday to go through again and look at additional cuts, and staff performed. They looked at cuts. So with that, I'll stand for any questions or suggestions or anything like that.
Director Christina Casavage.
You know, when I went through the 25 budget and I was looking kind of specifically at travel, if we break down all the different divisions within water and sewer, it's $425,002. So that's for line items for airfare or air travel, lodging, other travel, which is like per diem, conferences and seminars. It seems excessive to me. I mean, I understand that people have to travel for certifications and things like that, but, you know, like, and I used last week as an example that for engineering and Stan's department, we'd budgeted, I think, $4,000, but engineering under water and sewer, $124,000. You know, easement, building and station maintenance, we budgeted $25,000 for their travel. There was on, like on page 622, we budgeted $18,000 just for per diem charges. The travel seems excessive.
Yes, ma'am, and if you look at where most of our cuts were from, it was from training and travel. We cut from airfare. Some of this will not be used. So I will state in 5501, for example, there is a line item for EPA. So if we travel to meet with EPA face-to-face like we did a few years ago when the mayor and Director Rigo and I and our administrator at the time went down to Dallas, that's paid out of that. So that's a placeholder for that. If it's not used at the end of the year, it's turned back. But we did go through and we did cut a large portion. In engineering, we cut out of conferences 53,000. Lodging was 10,000, other travel 71. So I did hear what you said last Tuesday, and that was one of the areas that we looked at and said, okay, is this, do we have the hours for the certifications? And if we do we need to go to the training? And we made the appropriate cuts.
Anything else?
I'm going to look this over. Someone else can go.
Director Kim.
Thank you, Mayor. Lance, just looking over this document, are these cuts sustainable for the next fiscal year?
No.
These are just
These are
one-time cuts?
These are one-time cuts. Will they be, can we tighten, sharpen the pencil a little bit? Yes, but the fact of the matter is people have to have training to keep their certifications, their license, things of that nature. And that's where we went and looked at who already has enough hours for, the bare minimum hours to get their renewals for this year. This is a renewal year for water and wastewater. Engineers have renewal hours that they have to keep their license, as do several others, backflow prevention, things of that nature. So that's where we looked at making the cuts, as if people had it. And then also, are you participating at a conference or in the training? So for example, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be going to the Arkansas Water Conference. I'm the chair of a couple of the committees. I'm presenting on Monday. I'm presenting on Tuesday. So that's another thing that we're looking at, is how involved are you? The Arkansas Water Conference, we had a lot of people that were already signed up. It's past the point where we could ask for a refund from the organization. So getting those hours right now is important. But here again, can we spread this out a little bit more? Yes, but ultimately, and I'll give you an example. One of the things that we cut in 5626, I believe it's on page 3, $325,000 out of building maintenance. That is basically all of the cameras for security for our pump stations. We just cut it because we haven't had it before. Can we cut it this year because they're still running the fiber to those sites? So when will that be ready? I don't know. But for next year, we need to definitely look at increasing our security at those stations. So some of this, we have deferred maintenance, deferred different other things, testing. Let's see. Gentlemen, feel free to jump in.
There is a Lancer for the lab that you're supposed to buy this year. That was like for $40,000.
There you go.
So there's another lab equipment that we actually, can you hear me now?
Maybe move it closer to it. Thank you.
Talk closer to it. Thank you, Raul.
Okay. Sorry about that. So there's another deferred equipment that we had in the lab that we're supposed to buy this year, $40,000. That's a washer, a glassware washer. So we're going to defer it for next year now. So that's another $40,000 that Lance is talking about.
So most of these cuts here, if I'm understanding right, for fiscal year 26, you'll need to build them back.
We'll have to build some of them back in. Again, we are going to look at how can we spread things out over a 2-year period maybe to do that. But
how many vacant positions does the Utilities Department have currently?
I believe besides what was already pointed out in the memo, I believe we have 2 additional. And I would have to get with HR on that. Those 2 are required, and I'll be truthful with you, we held those open. We did not advertise. Those are water treatment plant operators. We are required to have a certain number by law. We have one open at each plant, and if the board were to look at reducing staffing that were already filled, I wanted to have a place for at least 2 people to go if they so chose. So that's why we have not advertised for that. And that's kind of what we've done. I believe Kenny has 4 positions that are open. 3 of those he's ready to fill. We're waiting until after tonight, this discussion, but it is for the leak crews that Director Martin mentioned earlier, that we would have additional staff. So I believe that that's pretty much it for you, or you have one additional in the maintenance?
Oh, we have one additional opening in meter maintenance for a lead person.
Okay.
For what? 3. It'll be a meter maintenance lead person.
We do have some additional position as an electrician and electronic tech, and then wastewater mechanic.
So I guess, just speaking among my colleagues, I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see how these conversations go over the next few weeks. Because I think, we're operating from, as we talked about last time, Director Settle's priorities, Director Christina Casav is talking about building back, starting at 0 and kind of looking at this. And then we've talked about getting some things proposed in cuts before, as Director Rigo's mentioned, about before May 13th, which I'm really for all 4 of those, or all 3 of those conversations to happen. The other thought that I was thinking through as I left the meeting last week coming into this week is, if we have say a $5 million easy number here, $5 million deficit, asking, Jeff Deeman as the acting city administrator to propose where he would like to see us make cuts to no longer have that deficit. Because for me as a new guy sitting here, full transparency, it's a big, thick book I was handed. I make a part-time salary doing this. You guys make a full-time salary doing this. You do this every day, and if I sit here and pick line items to sit here and cut, I may be picking the most, detrimental cut unbeknowingly to myself. And so I don't know if there's a target that we're looking for, but I think that would probably be helpful even among us, because maybe utilities can't do this, but there are other areas that yield a lot more savings. But what I hear tonight, which I am for, and which I applauded earlier in the meeting, in the regular meeting, is that the equipment needed, you guys have found by these cuts to cover the needed equipment, and then will help us in perpetuity with the the redundancy and all the things we talked about. But this is technically not really going to help us in the savings. When I think of a savings, I think of something that won't come back in the next fiscal year to be built back into it. I see it as shrinking the waste of the budget, meaning the whole circumference of the waste, taking a human analogy here.
A diet.
Yes, bringing it in and in and in. And so I like this. I'm just also thinking, if you had to, Lance, let's say, proposing another scenario here, obviously this was good. If you had to go further, what would it look like next? If there was more, let's say we needed you to do 10% more. Is there anything you would even think that would?
It would be personnel, and it would be loss of service, resulting in loss of service. That's, if you're looking at long-term cost, personnel is the one that, because you've got your benefits, you've got salaries, you have all of that. Still have to have chemicals, still have to have electricity, still have to have parts. And, one of the things when we went through and looked at the personnel, the first thing I had to look at was what is required regulatory-wise. So treatment operators for water and wastewater. And I will let you know that the health department actually called me about these cuts, as did DEQ, to ask what the personnel how that was going to impact our regulatory requirements. And I assured them that we were making sure that we met what was required for that. System control, we have to have that, and those have to be operators. So you get into a balancing act of what do you start cutting, and leak crews would be one area, because right now you can have leaks. It's legal to have leaks. I know it's a nuisance. I know we don't want them, but ultimately speaking, there is no law that says you cannot have a water leak. In fact, most systems do. Ours are better than some in this region when you look at our unaccounted for water. So,
But just for our own benefit, on that hypothetical, which I'm not advocating, I want to hear me, I've been locking, let's fix leaks. I'm not talking about cutting it down. But let's say you cut it from 5 crews to 3 crews. What kind of savings are we looking at, Kenny, by taking personnel off of 2 crews? I mean, ideally, those 3 crews would have a load of equipment. There would be a whole lot of equipment there so that there would not be a day that they're not working. But what's the savings on the personnel side of that?
A budgetary number?
Yeah.
I would put it in the, probably the $300,000 to $400,000 range for that.
Okay.
And then the ancillary costs that you would get for not running all the equipment, fuel, that sort of thing, maintenance.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions? Director Christina DeSantis.
You know, I mentioned this last week too, but, you know, I'd like to move to doing the trip reports because, you know, I'd like to know how much of this travel is actually necessary. You know, I know you said that you were leading a conference or speaking at a conference. You know, in my experience, when I've been asked to speak at a conference, I get paid a fee to speak. I get my airfare covered. I get my hotel covered. Is that not the same?
That's not the case in this industry.
Okay, well, maybe
especially, you know, the one I'm going to is here in Arkansas. It's in Hot Springs, and it's the people that speak. None of them are paid.
So maybe we should bring some of these conferences to Fort Smith.
Fort Smith is not big enough for this conference. In fact, Hot Springs and Little Rock are the only ones that have conference centers large enough for the Expo Center. Even Northwest Arkansas's conference, because I used to be the chair of this conference, we looked at moving it. Those have the 2 largest convention centers are in Little Rock and Hot Springs. But other conferences, we do look at. We did have actually a conference here.
Specialty conference.
Yeah, was that 2 years ago?
That was 2 years.
2 years ago, we brought the AWEA, which is the Arkansas Water Environment Association, had their specialty conference here, and it was well attended. So we are on the rotation, but a lot of times what these conferences try to do is rotate around the state so that the smaller cities can attend as well, because they can drive in. They may, you know, you may have a water operator that's also the mayor, so he can only give up a day or half a day. So that's why they're not all here and they're spread out, except for those that are very large.
You know, I was excited to see the cuts. I was excited to see the number you came up with, but it feels disheartening to me that we're not looking at these to be permanent cuts, because, you know, you're an enterprise fund and, I mean, you're broke. You know, when you're broke, it's money in and money out. If you've got only so much coming in, then we've got to live within those means. And that, you know, that's why I'm a big advocate of the priority-based budgeting, where we can look at the money we've got and figure out where to best utilize it. But we've got to do things differently. I think the past few years we've been in this, you know, kind of mindset of all spending is justified, and we've just got to change that mindset.
Again, ma'am, we have given back money. We have not spent our entire budget the last 3 years, 4 years that I've been the utility director. We have made sure that there is money at the end of the year that is given back. We just have to plan for a worst-case scenario based on production. And that's basically production, kind of how it's done in the industry. So
You know,
I agree with you. We don't need to spend everything that we have.
I guess it's just different for me coming from a small business background. We have to work within what we have. You know, I don't get to set a budget at my business for, you know, so many millions of dollars and then hope the money comes in. You know, we've got to look at some cuts that we can make permanently. I mean, can we not challenge some things that are regulatory? I mean, like, what happened if we didn't put fluoride in the water? I mean, we're spending, what, $700,000 on that? I mean,
We would end up probably under a consent administrative order and be fined, and then the state would come in and force us to do it.
is Colby here? Can he speak on that?
No, he
Attorney
left.
Don?
He left. I might say to that end, you know, I think all of the department heads, including utilities, recognize that just from other discussions that we've had, I mean, the board's had plenty of discussions, we've had staff discussions as well, that budgeting for fiscal year 26, for example, will be looked at a little bit differently. There will be staff knows that there's an expectation of the board that we come back with a budget that shows a stronger attempt, hopefully we get there, of managing towards a structural budget to where we budget expenses at the same level we're budgeting revenues and not budget a deficit. Now, can we get there in 1 year? I don't know. I hope so. We will certainly give it a shot. It may take a couple of years, but I think the overall goal will be to get there. And so I think that when utilities, comments that these are one-time cuts through this budget, maybe that's true. Maybe some of these things get added back in. But overall, when we review the entire budget, some other things will be coming out to make up for some of these things going back in. And so I think there is a recognition that the board expects us to do that. And we're already committed to doing that work. I think some of that will start with, some of that started already. With this department. I think our other departments are paying attention, and when they have their turn on at this seat in the next couple of weeks, we'll have some of those same discussions. I think.
Well, I just want to make sure that's clear, because we have some departments that are lean. I mean, like engineering, Stan's department, their budget is almost all labor and benefits. Their budget's like 1.8 something million, 1.7 is labor and benefits. They have variable expenses about $80,000. This general ledger is 884 pages. Water utilities compromise about 300 pages of that. You can't tell me there's not waste in here. I know it's in there, and maybe some people don't want to go line item by line item, but that's what I'm doing. That's why I've got all these Post-it notes. That's why I can identify we don't need to spend $50,000 on new front doors for this building or $20,000 on change help signs when the program's only made $900. I think we all need to be working towards a common goal of reducing and cutting waste. That's all.
Director Good.
Thank you, Mayor. Just some comments. So some of the things that I've heard and some of the things that I know are true since the years I've been serving on this board. We talk about the budget every year. We talk about cutting back and tightening our belts. To be perfectly honest, I do have a lot of respect for our department heads and our staff. I don't believe that at any time that I've served on this board have we had a department come to us and ask for an inflated budget just so they could have extra money to do whatever they wanted to. I think we all have, particularly the department heads, have the same goal in mind, is not only to see them personally, but their departments to be successful, but us as a city. because they know, as we've all seen at these meetings, our board of directors will ask staff the hard questions and make demands on service. Thinking about the demands that we put on staff, if we think of cutting personnel, we're also adding to the loss of service. Lance just spoke about that. You know, there is systematic morale issues that go into that. You know, say we cut, I'm just going to give an example. My department, Director 2, has an assistant, and we're going to cut my assistant. That means there's more work on me to do. Not only is there more work for me to do, you know, I have a higher expectation to provide for the board. I'm going to be stressed. How am I going to deal with the citizens that I'm dealing with? How am I going to do with my staff that I'm dealing with? You know, actually, that's happening to me at FedEx, so I can relate. You know, we talk about waste and fraud. You know, personally, I don't see it. Can we cut back some small pieces? Absolutely. You know, does staff do, and I can't say that you don't or that you do the best jobs you can in trying to find the cheapest of service, but sometimes that's not what we're after. We can't always go after the cheapest service or the cheapest equipment or the cheapest doors. Granted, Director Settle brought up, you know, taking care of some piping issues while we're in the area. Great idea. Same thing we were doing with the consent decree. You know, we were doing extra work while we were in the areas that we knew that were 4s and 5s that we needed to handle. So I think that we as a board, yes, we can be frugal. Absolutely. Do we need to have trust in our staff, our department heads, in doing what we've tasked them to do? I think we have that wholeheartedly. Just like Director Kemp just spoke to. You know, we are part-time board members. I'm saying part-time, but I'll tell you, I spend more time doing this than I do at FedEx. But we don't do the jobs that our department heads do. We have to rely on their expertise and professionalism. You know, one of the things that just came up, Director Kemp was talking about savings in cutting back in the number of personnel to fix water leaks. You know, even though that's a great thought, you know, there is some savings to be had if we cut back and not fix as many leaks. But to remind my colleagues, fixing these leaks was a real big issue. You know, board members were demanding that we cut leaks. So is the savings of personnel greater than the perceived savings of the water loss? So we can demand one thing on one hand and expect something else in the other. But we have to make sense of it all. You know, we can't talk about cutting personnel and then provide more service when you can't have both. We're not going to be able to have both. That's all for now.
Director Kemp, and then
Yeah.
Director Savage.
Thank you for your comments, Director Good. I would agree. I'm not, just for point of clarity here, not for cutting the personnel for fixing water leaks. As a hypothetical, I want to point out that I think $300,000 savings is a number that I was like, well, what would it even be? So identifying targets. I think for me, it's a philosophical policy kind of conversation here that if the budget is $5 million on paper, you know, if we all go out and plan it, we've spent $5 million too much from what we've brought in. But we know that we're not going to do that because, well, we'll just not spend our budget. And then we'll end the year just fine. I guess where I'm at is, okay, well then to do that, what did we have to do? If you play that out and that's how this was going to end in 2025, I think what we need to do is say, we need to identify those items now and change the whole thought process and philosophy of looking at this strategy. And then if we need more money, then come back and approve that. And so it almost seems as if times it's like this is a way that if we can get this budget approved, then we can kind of have some lateral here, whereas that's not going to lead itself to a budget savings. Or if we are in the conversation of, well, where can we shrink this overall footprint down, it has to be somewhere. Or we are saying we're going to spend $5 million more than we bring in this year, which I think that won't be the answer. But I think the answer has got to be, well, then if you're going to make those cuts, what would those cuts be?
Director George Cassavis.
Hey, Lance.
Yes, sir.
There's a lot of people in utilities that are concerned that their jobs may be cut.
Yes, sir.
Tell me what's going on with that.
Well, I was given a task by administration to identify FTE reduction. And I identified that, and I met with my apologies. I met with staff whose positions were identified as potential to be cut. And because I didn't want them to find out when a board packet came out that that position was one that was not a regulatory requirement or had a, you have to look at return on investment and things of that nature. And I try to be transparent with my employees. I try to be upfront. I treat them the way I would want to be treated. If Mr. Dingman knew that my job was on the line, I would hope that he would come to me and say, hey, your job is on the line. So I met with those staff members, and I told them that we would be meeting tonight to discuss this. And there are others in the department that have heard this and have seen the board packet that went out, and they are also concerned because to Director Kemp's question, okay, is this the first round of layoffs? So it has had a marketable negative impact on morale throughout the entire department.
Well, in the past, the way that was approached was that we would reduce staff by attrition, not by termination. So if somebody decided to quit, we just wouldn't fill that position. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but that's not the directive I was given.
That's not what?
The directive I was given. Mr. Dingman asked me to identify positions that could be cut. And I did ask him on last Wednesday, should I have this conversation with staff to give them a heads up that this is going to be in the board packet? And he said yes, and I agreed with his decision. I think that was, again, the right thing to do, to be transparent with the employees.
Will the board be able to vote on this?
This is all up to the board. Everything in here is up to the board. This is not.
If you bring recommendations for cuts, then the board would have to approve that, correct?
That is correct. This is solely up to the board. I was asked to bring a recommendation. I brought the recommendation, much like Director Rigo said. Before he left, he felt just either freezing or getting rid of all the vacants that were identified was his choice, if you will, his vote. If I'm not mistaken, if I am, please correct me, but that's what I heard. So that's why I even gave options of, hey, if you're not looking at getting rid of everyone, here's packets that you could look at, and here is the vacancy that would save, I believe, about $900,000 a year. So you're looking at almost $1 million a year in savings. That the positions are already vacant. That's not only a $900,000 savings next year to Director Kemp's year-over-year savings, but that's an immediate savings for this year as well. And that would go on and on. So to that end, it's up to the board to decide. It's not up to us on letting anyone go. I prefer not to let anyone go. I will be truthful with you, Director Cassavis. I have lost sleep over this. I mean, these people give their all every day.
I know they do, and they're letting me know about it.
They are not a number. They are a name.
And they have bills to pay. They got kids. They got families. They got mortgages. They got groceries, insurance.
And they have my respect for everything that they do. And so if you wanted a recommendation from me on long-term cuts, I would say take the option where we have vacant positions that were identified in the memo and either freeze those positions or remove them, because that has no impact on a living person right now. But that would be my recommendation.
Well, Lance, you know, that's the last thing I want is to lay anybody off.
I agree.
I just, you know, I mean, it's tough out there for people.
Yes.
People are struggling, and then to, you know, lose your job and then lose, I mean, and to get another, to be able to get another job that might be paid the same amount, you don't, is a mystery. You don't know. I don't, so, well, let me ask you one more question. Why were these people hired for this position if they weren't essential?
There's a difference between being essential and so every position, with the exception of one, and I will be truthful with you, the number one priority, we didn't even know we had that position on the books. It has been vacant since it was open for a heavy equipment mechanic. And we were looking through it and we saw what we had vacant, and I went to that manager and that supervisor and they said, we didn't even know we had it. It's been vacant since 2020. So if we haven't had it in 4 years and didn't even know it, it's not an essential position. Several of these other positions are essential. When you look at even the vacant, some of the vacant ones, I would consider essential, but I'm looking at trying to find ways to reduce the budget, reduce overhead that have a meaningful year-over-year impact. So to say that someone's in a position that we've hired someone and they aren't essential, I can't say that. I'm saying that I had to look in, are they required by a regulatory requirement for safe drinking water, clean water, the consent decree, you know, billing, you know, some of the other work that we do. That's what I had to go by.
Yeah. Well, Lynch, you know what really, I'm sorry to you know what pisses me off, and this is no reflection on you, but we're talking about laying people off, yet we spent $4.2 million on some damn slides. I'm sorry. You know, this, I know you had nothing to do with that, but this, you know, we're spending and then we're saying, well, we're going to have to lay off. This, I don't think this is fair to anybody. But that's all I got to say.
Mr. Dingman, and then.
Yeah, I would say to add to what Lance mentioned, I mean, you know, we as of April the 1st, there were 29 vacancies in the Utilities Department. And that number has remained relatively unchanged for the last 4 months. Of course, we have put a restriction on hiring.
Right.
I recognize that. But there are 29 vacancies currently. And so my discussion with Lance started with, we've got vacancies here. Why can we not use those, reduce our budget by those, and call it good and move on?
Yeah.
Lance pointed out that.
Why can't we do that?
Lance pointed out that some of these positions that are currently on our vacancy list are ones that do have a regulatory requirement or some requirement that the utility needs to fulfill, that eventually we will need to fill those. And so they couldn't necessarily go unfilled forever. And so that's when the discussion turned to, well, do we have some that we could do without? And yes, unfortunately at the moment, some of them have people in them, but are they services that we could eventually let go of? I think so. And I don't like the idea of terminating people. I like the idea of being able to repurpose them or reassign them to other departments. I think there are, out of the 26 that you enumerated, 15 were vacant, 11 positions have people in them. We have an idea on one of them for potentially moving to a different department, for that whole function to move to a different department. That's a possibility. There are possibilities here for the positions we're talking about, and nobody's saying that, you know, if we come out, well, this is a direction we want to go, then we're going to eliminate these positions immediately. There'll have to be a time, and even if it's a direction that we move that direction as attrition happens to these identified positions, then so be it. But in the meantime, we will, I mean, I would advocate that we, like Lance has mentioned, and I think Director Rigo also did, look at the vacant ones first, continue to reevaluate the ones that we have marked, and say, as these positions become vacant, or as we can reassign these employees to something more suitable to either to the utility or to a different department, it's a comparable position that they're willing to do, then we do that and then eliminate these positions.
How many employees does utilities have?
298. That's the 298 budgeted positions. As of April the 1st, they had 269 employees.
Can we not, if we have things that are required, have somebody trained on, more than one thing, so one person may satisfy several different requirements?
I think they certainly do that already.
We already do that, but some of it is, so water treatment plant operator, they have to be at the plant. They can't be at both plants at the same time. So that's why, I'll tell you, we have had the same number of water treatment plant operators since 1996, and it is the bare minimum number that we're allowed to have. Same thing on wastewater treatment operators.
Well, and we have two of each of those plants. We have the same number at each of those plants.
So to Director George Casavas's point, and definitely to Acting Administrator Dingman's point, through attrition, if we were to eliminate all those positions, through attrition would also be, to me, acceptable, or reassignment as positions became available would be much, it would help me sleep at night, sir.
Well, I just wanted to clarify, I wasn't advocating for layoffs. I know you said you like Director Rigo's plan, but that, that's what his plan will end up including, especially in engineering. I'm in favor of eliminating positions through attrition, and I think this is a good start. But the utilities budget is $67,481,000. And we're saving, 1.173, a little over that, so it's a little less than 2%. So that's a good start, but, when we think about it, it's about a 1.7% savings. And I know you said you like Director Rigo's plan, that's advocating for, 5%. Do you think we could get to 5%?
Could I make an arbitrary cut to 5%? Yeah, I could do that, but it would be foolhardy, and I may be back to the board in the middle of the year saying I need additional funds for chemicals, electrical, all of that. I mean, that's kind of the thing that I don't want to play a game with the board. I want to be upfront and transparent with you. We've made the cuts that we saw that we could make. Could we cut chemicals for water treatment and wastewater treatment to levels that are closer to what we had last year? Yeah, but if I run short, I'm going to have to come back and say, we need more money. If that's what the board wishes that we do, and then that's something that we can do. But I'm trying to, again, walk that very thin line of budgeting the proper amount each year, and then whatever we don't use is given back. It's not spent. Like last year, again, we gave back about $5 million, and we got that number from finance. It wasn't our number. That was one that we got from finance that we didn't use in whatever, training, chemicals, electrical, whatever, because we don't know what we're going to spend on that because we don't know what our full demand is going to be on production.
Do we buy the chemicals directly from the manufacturer?
No, we don't. The closest one that we do that's directly from the manufacturer is chlorine gas, and there is only one supplier in the entire region for chlorine gas, and we negotiate the best price we can get with them. Everything else is done on a reverse bid, so people bid, if you bid $2, I see that it was a $2, I don't know that it's you, but I see a $2 bid, and I bid $1.98, and the next person will bid down $1.95, and we've been doing that for several years, and that has worked very well for us to get multiple bids at the lowest cost.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify, I was not in favor of laying people off. I think we should always avoid that if possible. And I also wanted to clarify that the budget is 67 million and not 5. Thank you.
Jeff, when will this come to the board to be voted on, these cuts?
This is at the board's discretion. We're reviewing these now. And,
Well,
when we get through all of these departments the next 3 weeks,
mm-hmm.
then we'll have a summary of that for the board to review.
Okay.
Director Settle.
Thank you, Mayor. Lance, if you look at the budget, your budget, about $20 million is bonds. 2019.
Yes.
Okay, so you theoretically could take that out of the equation, so you're down to about $45.5 million, roughly.
Yes, sir.
So the piece of paper we got on the desk, this one, and the proposed budgets you have would equal almost $2 million in cuts. Is that what you're suggesting?
That's what I'm suggesting.
So
Well, let me back up. Remember that we reused part of the 1.17
Okay.
for purchasing 725 roughly $1,000 worth of equipment. So it wouldn't be, that savings went into purchasing equipment. It wouldn't be the full 1.1.
What I'd like to do is take this sheet that you gave us on our desk, what's in the memo, put it all together and say, this is our proposed cuts.
Okay.
And so if you do roughly $2 million, maybe it's less than that, over the $45.5 million, it's 4.3%. Because you can't cut bonds, so those have to stay. But then it leads me to the question, I'm gonna propose something for you and your team to do.
Okay.
So starting in 2009, 2007 was when I joined the board. Andre voted and joined in 2008. George came in 2010. Starting in 2007, I like a year-by-year analysis of departments of what the positions were. So if you had administrate, you talk about treatment plant being the same treatment operators. Every year to be the same. Sewer to be the treatment. I'd like to see where those growth areas are. I know that during the consent decree negotiations, we had to add people, but I argue that maybe as time goes through, people leave, people quit. I'd like to see where all the positions are at. I did some quick math here, and I know where they're at, but I want the board to see year by year where that growth is. I think that would tell us what happened.
Okay.
I just
And you want that just for the utility department?
for water for each department. I think it would tell us a story. I remember 77 people added during the consent decree. I know there's people out there, but that you have 29 positions open. But some of those are stuff that I think we need. Because what you don't want to do is leave a vacant mechanic open and go spend triple salary for somebody else to do it because you can't find somebody local.
I agree.
The savings can be, if, instead of hiring a contractor, you fill internal. That's kind of where I'm at, is I'd like to see the year-by-year comparison of each department, where those growth areas are, because I remember when we first started, the basics of what we do is supply clean drinking water to our citizens and take care of their sewage out and do it in the environmentally safe way.
Yes, sir.
Everything else is ancillary. And so that's what I kind of go back to is, what do we need to do bare bones to keep things chugging? And then if we got people there, what are they doing? And if they're creating value, that's great, but let's understand the value. And if there's positions that they can transfer to or fill in other roles, maybe it's time to look at those.
I will tell you that there will be kind of a hiccup in that, because if you remember right, we actually changed some of the numbering.
Oh, it's going to take some time to go through it.
I will be able to.
You should be able to.
I can combine.
I've done back of the number math here. I'm doing the same thing. I saw old numbers and had to go back and read what the titles were and understand it. Yes.
So, for example, 5605 and 5609 are now 5625.
Yep.
But that's easy enough that I could combine
Okay.
those.
Thank you.
Yes.
Director Neil Martin.
I have a question that I need clarification on, and I think I need it from Andy. This book that I have here, the proposed budget from 2025, shows that the revenue for water and sewer operating fund is $86 million. 14. However, when I'm looking at, Kevin has it up online over here, and I don't have it up. There's a difference there. I mean, that's the adopted budget. But we didn't do anything with revenue in our budget. So I want to know if this book, I can use this book and trust
The first book, the proposed book, I believe we had the planned sewer and water rate increases included in those revenue projections.
The water rates we already passed.
Remember there was the EPA plan had a water rate increase. I think it was effective January 1st. Wasn't that right? Do you remember that right, Lance?
I believe that's.
EPA, not water, sewer.
No, there was one that was given to EPA that had water and sewer.
There was a consolidated financial plan that had, and so that was what came in the proposed. But then when you adopted the budget, they had us change the projections to just the sewer rate increase that we did, that y'all passed. That's going into effect July 1st or June 1st. So that's what the difference is. It went from about 86 million to about 73 million. If you look at what the adopted budget was for water and sewer fund.
So this book is worthless to me at this point.
Yeah, the proposed one.
The proposed one just
The
has
adopted
a
one
different
is-
revenue projection for water and sewer.
Okay. All right. You know, I'm just summarize a couple things here. I think one of the things we did tonight was really good, and I think it went back to what Director Katsavis said, or Director Christina Katsavis I brought up. We reprioritized some things tonight. We reprioritized water leaks tonight. I think that's something we've heard from citizens and something that we took care of. So I think that's good. I think one of the things that we also need to look at, Lance, as a part of your evaluation, I think we ought to look at that org chart that you sent me. I think we need to look at, do we need to restructure how we do things? Is our supervisor to operations workload, is our span of control too low? I think we need to look at that as well as we're going through this. I'm hopeful that when we go and redo the budget for 26, that we are looking at what are those things that are priorities to the board, and which is ultimately the priority of the citizens. And that's the way we build this thing out, is we take into consideration the board, which should be taking into consideration the citizens, and building based off of that. So what we believe is important should be the driving force. Obviously, we've got regulatory. I mean, we can't get around that. But I think we need to look at that hard when we rebuild this budget in 26. But I agree with what Director Settle said. I think it's important that we see what those numbers are based off of this discussion tonight, and come back with a good recommendation for modification of this 25 budget.
Any other questions?
I think just for me, if I could, Mayor. So I understand that our budget's more than $5 million. I guess where I'm trying to come to the spirit is this. So just questions for, I guess, City Administrator Damon here. I think the number I'm also thinking about is our general fund deficit, more than I am than the sewer deficit here. But in this whole conversation of, if we made no changes and ran this to the end of the year, how will this specific item handle that at the outcome set of it? Is there a deficit within this part of the budget, or are we okay here?
You mean the water and sewer fund?
Correct.
I think there's budgeted deficit in the water and sewer fund in terms of expenses over anticipated revenues, yes.
Okay. And so to not have that, we're going to have to freeze expenses or monitor and make sure that you just don't spend it. Is that correct?
That's, so what we will be doing, because to pay for the equipment, They're actually going to move that out of those budgets. What's on this sheet will be moved over to a capital outlay, equipment outlay fund to purchase the equipment. The rest of it can be removed from that and put into the unobligated water and sewer fund. So then that's then in there, and we're not even able to touch it at that point in time. The same thing would be for if the board chose to take vacant positions and either freeze them, or to Director Settle's point, he sees some that he thinks just need to be frozen for now. That money years ago the position was approved but unfunded. So the funds that are currently in the budget would be taken out and put directly into the unobligated funds, and we couldn't fill it because there's no funds to that. So I hope I'm answering your question.
Yeah, to me, we can get into all the technicality of it, but I come from a simple nonprofit mindset. So truly, that's my expertise in this. And, if you don't have it, you don't get to spend it. I mean, that's exactly where you
move it out of your checking account into savings, and somebody else has control over the savings, so that you can't move stuff out of savings back into checking. That's what we're talking about.
So I'm not hung up on the technical parts of the equipment purchase. I guess where I'm at is, we got this proposal here, which will get us $1.1 million, not touching personnel, which will cover the equipment purchases.
Yes. And then
the proposals of the vacant positions, if we did not accrue those, are we still in compliance if we don't accrue those vacant positions?
Those positions.
Which is $969,000, something like that?
Yeah, if it was a compliance issue, it did not end up in the memo, because I can't legally do that.
So taking you at your professional opinion, that really is where you see, besides cutting services, these are the cuts that you can propose from your expertise.
Yes.
Thank you for your work. Yes.
And I would also be remiss if I didn't point out to the two gentlemen and mention Jimmy Johnson as well, their expertise as well.
Yeah, I appreciate your work on this. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? You have anything else, Lance?
No, sir. I just want to thank the board. I know that this is a very difficult discussion to have for all of us. I do want to thank the board for being understanding of those positions that are filled. Those men and women mean a lot to me, and they should mean a lot to this city, because they're the unsung heroes that are protecting our water and making sure that the wastewater keeps flowing, not in the street, but to the treatment plants. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dingman? You don't have anything? Okay, if there are no further questions or comments from the board, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
If I could, hold on, Mayor, just 1 second, because I do perceive something in the future. Okay, that's fine. I'll talk to the administrator after this.
Right, do that. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.